One of my friends introduced me after the workshop to Lama Gangchen. I walked up to him and I looked at him and he looked at me, and it was a silence for a while. I had a very strange feeling of like some kind of familiarity, and also it was like I had a feeling of a very large space. It was like I entered like a big ocean.
This is our very first video podcast. Yay! Today, we're really honored to have with us a really special guest. We have Dr. Rogier Hoenders. Rogier is an integrative psychiatrist. He's head of research and clinical affairs at the Center of Integrative Psychiatry Lentis in Groningen, the Netherlands. He's also a professor of spirituality, lifestyle, and mental health at the University of Groningen. Rogier has a passion for teaching and for his life with Lama Gangchen. He traveled all over the world with Lama Gangchen, speaking at conferences and meeting with healers, doctors, teachers of holistic medicine. This way, Rogier was personally mentored by Lama Gangchen. Welcome to the show, Rogier.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you so much for your kind invitation. It's an honor for me to be here. I'm very happy to share all the experiences which have been amazing.
Yeah, life-altering, right?
Yes,
right?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, let's start from the beginning. How did you meet Lama Gangchen?
I met Lama Gangchen in March of 2004 in the south of the Netherlands. This was after, for me, a very difficult year. I had a crisis year in 2003. I had a breakup of a relationship. I went out of the house. I had a change of jobs. Basically, everything changed and fell apart. And at that time, my sister was visiting me, and she was talking about all different things that were happening to her in her life. And I was a little bit distracted because of all the trouble I was in. So I was saying, yes, like this. And then in between all of that, she said, and I also met somebody who was connected to a Tibetan Lama healer. And then I had this goosebumps and electricity down my spine. I said, "Woo, where, what?" And then she said, "Well, I'm not going to tell you because when I was talking about myself, you didn't listen. And now that I'm telling this, so." But she was a little bit right, so I apologized. And then she told me. And then very soon after that, I just jumped in my car and I went there because I had for a long time in my life a very strong attraction to the Himalayas and specifically to Tibet. Mm-hmm. I've been collecting all of these books. I had like 25 books about Tibet in my room. I was reading first about the country, then I was reading about Tibetan medicine because I was studying medicine at the time, and then I was reading about Tibetan Buddhism, and I was so much interested. I also wanted to do meditation, but I didn't know how. I knew I was blocked there. I needed something else, and then I heard about this and I thought I have to go there. So I went and met him in an old monastery in Barlo, and it was a 3-day workshop. And so I went there, and one of my friends introduced me after the workshop to Lama Gangchen. I walked up to him and I looked at him and he looked at me. And it was a silence for a while. And then I had a very strange feeling of like some kind of familiarity. And also it was like I had a feeling of a very large space. It was like I felt like I entered like a big ocean. And that was I never had things like that before. So that was very intriguing for me. So I thought, who is this guy? So I checked him out on the internet. So I started Googling him. Right. And then I found out he had his center in Italy. And even more than that, a few months later, he would organize a conference on integrative medicine with many different kind of doctors and healers from all around the world. So I thought, I have to be there. So
was that in Italy? That conference was in Italy?
Yeah, it was in Filagulia next to the lake in Lago Maggiore.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
And so I went there, and it was an amazing experience. And I met so many different kind of doctors and healers there, and people with interest in different healing cultures and traditions from around the world. And during those conference days, we also went to the monastery in Albagnano Healing Meditation Center. And so I went there and I did some meditation. And then I was very much, I was like magnetized in a way and very much interested. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible introduction, right? To
Yeah. And
actually.
it was really incredible because I was so much ready for it because I had been
Mm,
interested for many years and I had this crisis in the year before. So there was no relation, there was even no house and no job. So I had my hands free. So I met him there. It was
mm,
in March in Holland. Then in May of the same year, I went to the conference in Italy.
mm.
Then 2 months later in July, I went for the summer retreat. In August, I went to Mexico to the conference he was supposed to go. He couldn't go. He said, "You go in my place. You represent
Really?
me." So yeah,
Really?
I did.
Wow.
And
Well,
then two
that's
months,
a big honor,
well,
especially
it was. I was
in
surprised, but he
your
asked me to do so.
meeting him.
Yeah, and was together with Alfredo, who has been on the show before. He was
Yeah.
also at the same conference. And then 2 months after that, I went with him to Sri Lanka to a big conference there. And a month after that to Kala Chakra retreat again in Albagnano. Then 2 months after that to Nepal, and 2 months after that to Madrid. So in this first year, I basically traveled all around the world with him,
Wow.
and that was an incredible experience. And I learned so many things on many different levels.
Yes. Wow. So isn't that interesting how for many of us we have some kind of a crisis, and that crisis looks like something negative, but it was actually a catalyst for you to have this whole new path in your life, right?
This is completely true, Leah. And I remember our friend David Severn Schreiber, who was a famous professor of psychiatry and also a friend of Lama Gangchen, and myself. And he used to say at conferences, a crisis, the Chinese word of crisis consists of two different signs. One sign is danger, and the other sign is change, or also translated as opportunity.
Opportunity.
So,
Yeah.
because there's a danger to the old structures, there's also an opportunity for new things and for change and to develop something which hasn't been there before. And that was exactly the case for me because the old structures fell away in 2003. And I was completely ready. And I had a very much fortune because I had no obligations at that time. So I had the time, space, and money to do something.
Yeah.
And so I could go on this year traveling everywhere and learning so many things.
Wow. Wow. That is incredible. The same thing for me when my mother passed away. My mother kind of framed my life. You know, I was very, very close to her. And when she passed away, she was quite young, 70 years old. It was as if this whole reality that I had been living shattered. And then that same year, Lama came into my life, you know, and I have this whole new way of living and new happiness and new purpose. Incredible, huh?
The interesting thing is we know this even from nature. First, if you're gardening, first you need to cut away all the old branches and all the old leaves for the new ones to be able to grow. There needs to be the space for that. And I felt it was exactly like this. But it was also for me very, I don't know how to say, I was very uncomfortable in a way. I was interested and a little bit uncomfortable at the same time because I'm like a medical doctor. I did my training in medical school. After that, I specialized to become a psychiatrist. And the last years also in science. I'm also a professor of spirituality, lifestyle, and mental health. So I'm very much formed by this Western culture of the cognitive, autonomous individual. Where the scientific and the material world is the most important thing in our lives, which gives us a hold and our safety. And suddenly I find myself going into this amazing world of Tibetan Buddhism and traveling with a Lama healer and his family throughout the Himalayas, it was very satisfying and intriguing and inspiring, but also challenging my worldview and challenging things I knew I took for granted, which will be possible or not possible. And it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. Well, and also around Lama, there's all kinds of mystical things, and Tibet has an incredibly deep, history of this mysticism. So there's a lot of things that you see that you don't necessarily can explain, right? that
Yes.
Occur, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I even had this feeling that Lama Gangchen was pressing me on these kind of things. So he seems to be eager to challenge my worldview, and especially for challenging my tendency to have a rational, a logical, material explanation of things.
Yeah.
I even suspect he was enjoying doing that. And then he also made this mudra of the Tibetan Buddhism, like cutting through the ego. And he said, Did you see that?" And I did like this. So it was. I had this feeling he was trying to tempt me to open the mind to a different aspect of life, which I was not so familiar with at the time.
And your relationship to time and to goals, and to if it doesn't exist, if you can't see it, right? All these
All of these things.
structures that conduct our Western worldview, right?
And at the same time, I was also longing for it, because when I was 14, 15, I was fascinated by how the mind works. So I did my talks at school about Freud, and Sigmund Freud, like the father of psychiatry. I didn't understand a thing, but I was just trying to talk about it. I was fascinated. Then to medical school in psychiatry, that it gave me some explanation. Also, the scientific world gives some explanation about things, but it didn't feel complete. And I was looking for a different paradigm, a different explanation. At the same time, I was also skeptic, and I felt sometimes pushed back by my more scientific approach. But I was also some interest to learn about different ways of seeing how the mind works, and we are so much learned to exploring outer space. I wanted to explore inner space in a way with somebody who was experiencing that, and that was what Lama Gangchen was.
Yeah. And so let me just back up, because I want to ask you many, many questions about this. But what was it like when you had that first meditation? You said that you wanted to learn how to meditate, but you didn't know how, but then you learned. You went to Albignano Center. What was that experience like for you?
I was very happy with it, because before I was trying to meditate, but I had no instruction. So I was just sitting down in my room. I thought, what's going to happen now? And what should happen? And I was just like waiting for something spectacular to happen. But of course it didn't happen. So I was just getting bored, and my monkey mind went everywhere. So then I stopped. But I felt there was more to it. So then when I came to this Albignano Healing Meditation Center for the first time during the conference, it was very helpful for me to be together with a group who was meditating, and also to get some kind of instruction, like a guided meditation. La Michelle was doing at the time. That was really helpful, because when you have no trained mind, and you are in the Western world, and you focus inside, the only thing that really happens, that you start noticing what is already going on in your mind all the time, which is going up and down in chaos and thoughts and stuff. We have around 10,000 thoughts every day, of which 80% are the same of yesterday and the same as tomorrow.
Is that right?
Most of them are negative, mostly negative in things shouldn't have been as they happened before, like resentment about what happened before, and either desire or fear of the future, what is going to happen. So we have all the time all of these thoughts running through our mind, and in all of that we try to live our lives, but we are not happy with it. And I experienced it myself. I had a very comfortable life. Before the breakup, I had a relationship, a house, I had a job, I had a dog, I had friends, I had money, everything was there. But there was somehow I didn't feel happy. And then when everything broke down and I went with the Lama to Tibet, I was there experiencing altitude sickness. I had food poisoning. I had a jet lag. I had a very annoying roommate. And in the middle of all of that, for the first time, I felt a sense of happiness I didn't feel before. Wow. It was at the same time I felt, how is it possible? Because I noticed still my headache and my food poisoning, but there was on a deeper level, kind of happiness. And that was so good.
Life altering. Yeah, life altering.
Yeah.
Wow. I remember Claudia Puchan from Brazil. She was a guest on our show a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying that when she first went to Tibet, there was no running water, no electricity. They were sleeping on the floor. They were sleeping outside in tents, and it was torrential rains. Sometimes they would run out of food. It was the very first time in the 80s when Rinpoche went back to Tibet. She said, but I was so happy. I discovered this happiness that was beyond the physical comfort. And it gave, yeah,
Exactly.
life altering.
It's interesting because I was sitting next to Claudia in the airplane when I went the first time to Tibet. Oh. And we were traveling from one part to the other. We were already for 2 or 3 weeks on this trip. And then she had difficulty sleeping, I remember. She had very much strong sensations, and she took a lot of effort to get her sleep. Didn't work. And then I was sitting next to her, and for the first time, somehow she fell asleep. And I remember... in the plane. And then I remember she woke up, and then Lama Gangchen was coming through the aisle, walking towards us. And she says, "Oh, Lama, I'm so happy. First time I slept." And then he looked at me and he said, "Mind doctor, healer, friend, and disciple." Wow. He had this way of putting things. And that was... I still have so many memories of these kind of like he was like a kind of modern wizard in a way, like he used to know things or say things which are either difficult to understand or and at the same time inspiring or confusing. And that was one of these moments. I was a little bit like stunned. I didn't know what to say. Like he could also make you feel uncomfortable in this ways. But it was also... He was, from the very first start, it was in the first year I met him, we had a strong connection around medicine and mind medicine and how to do this. And this is also the reason I asked him to come to our conference, because in 2 years after I met him, I had this idea. For many years, I wanted to make a big conference. Not a big one. I'd like to make a conference on different healing modalities for psychiatric disorders. And so I was thinking about having maybe like 100 or 150 of my colleagues together and to have exchange and invite people from really different perspectives. I was thinking about inviting the Lama, which was, of course, a little bit out of the ordinary. Yes. And so I talked to him about it. I said, "What do you think?" And then he looked up and he said, "You make it very big." And that was also a little bit cryptic advice. He wouldn't explain any further. He'd just walk away. And then, but after that, somehow things came together, and all of a sudden there wasn't 100, there were not 200, not 300, not 500, not 1,000. There were 1,300 people coming to the first conference. It was amazing. It was like the enrollment exploded after that. He said this, and then he came there. And he looked at me and he said, "We are coming to bring the essence." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yes, psychiatry, there are so many things, but what is lacking is the spirituality part." And so La Michelle and myself, we are coming to bring this essence again back to your profession.
Wow. Bringing a whole new future into it. Yeah,
and what for me is so exciting is this was already for many, I think about like, say, 15 years ago. But now we see also that scientific research is showing that paying attention to spirituality and helping people to develop on the spiritual part is actually good for their health. It's good for longevity. It's good for mental health, for physical health. And so there's even a scientific part to it. But this is maybe, before I mentioned, there was some kind of uncomfortable feeling because I was trained not to do that. I was trained to stay in the scientific material worldview and not to go into this woo-woo of like spirituality, healing, and all of these kind of things. And it was somehow presented, I experienced, like you had to choose. Either you go for science or you go for religion and spirituality. It's not, you cannot have both. And this is interesting because in the Western world, we have this is dated back to the time when we had the first collision between science and the church. It was Copernicus, who was a scientist, who said, hey, listen, guys, it's not the sun going around the earth, it's the other way around. But as this was also part of some of the biblical text and the position of the church, he ran into the church. But then he died very soon, and afterwards it was an Italian guy, Galileo Galilei, who took on his work. He said, actually, this guy was right. And then he got in big trouble with the church. He had a trial by the Inquisition 3 times. He almost died. But he kept his position. And then there was this first split between the church and the scientific point. Mm-hmm. And after that, of course, we had René Descartes, who add to this that body and mind are really different. Body and mind are they cannot be reduced one to another. They are a fundamentally different origin. This was his most important message, which is true. After that, he also said they were separated. Body and mind were separated. I don't think Descartes ever said this, but it was made up like this in our history. And of course, it's crazy to say so, because when I'm sad, water comes out of my eye. So there's already your connection to body and mind. So everybody knows. But it's true that they are fundamentally different. And up till today, one of the biggest questions of science is, how are body and mind related? Or more specifically, how are the brain and the mind related to each other? We don't know this. This is one of the 10 biggest difficulties of science. And there you see, from Copernicus and Galileo up till today, there was a split, and it was science took over most of the body, and the church and spirituality took over the mind. It was like a kind of a deal. You take this part, we take this part. But I like to have both. So I thought, can I have both?
Wait a minute, I'm a whole being here.
Exactly.
Being. Right.
Yeah, I'd like to have both. And so, but we have a difficulty with this. And I saw this many years ago in Holland. There was one scientist, a professor, who was also the director of a scientific institute. And he said in an interview, I saw the wonder of God. I was praying for this patient. And then I saw on neuroimaging, I saw that his bone was grown again. And I don't want to go if this is true or not true, but this was his conviction, and he said so in an interview. And people got so mad with him and said, if you want to be a professor, you cannot say these things. You have to choose. And then in the end, he had lost his position as being the director of the scientific institute because of all of this hassle in the media. So as a culture, this is what I'm saying, we do not so much tolerate people who are like to have both at the same time. And I also encountered this in my career. Whenever I wanted to say things about spirituality or complementary medicines, from a medical point of view, then you get into trouble. And this shows how in our culture there were these two ways of dealing with the world have been separated. And now I think we live in a time where we need to bring them back together. And it doesn't mean that we have to mix things up, or that we are very naive saying that everything that's about spirituality is always positive. It's not as simple like that. But we need to revalue the aspects of spirituality in our life, and especially also in medicine. This is what I believe.
Yeah. And that's the one of the foundation pillars, if you will, of integrated medicine, right? That you would have this part. Mm-hmm. Exactly, can you share with us, what are those pillars? What are I know that there's in your book, Integrated Psychiatry, which I recommend everyone reading. I know you have a new book coming out, but I just wanted to share that in here, I was reading this morning, these 4 pillars. Could you share with us what those are?
Yes, I can. So integrative medicine, the first pillar of integrative medicine is about revaluing and optimizing the therapeutic relationship between the practitioner and the patient. Because in our enthusiasm for scientific research and protocols and managed care and all of these developments, we have lost contact with our patients. So we need to reestablish, revalue the therapeutic relationship, because it's the essence of any healing profession. We need to have a good contact with our patients. And the second part is holism, like a broad view. We tend to go to reductionism whenever we are focusing on a problem. We try to find the most small essence of the problem. For instance, a person experiences depression. They say depression is something is wrong with you, something wrong in your brain, something wrong in this part of your brain, something wrong in this receptor in this part of your brain, and we need to have this kind of molecules that will solve the problem. This is reductionism. And it has a place because it explains some part of the diseases we have and how we can solve them, but it also leads to a narrow view. And I think in our medicine, we have gone a little bit too far on this path. Sometimes you need reductionism. Sometimes you need the opposite, to look at the whole thing again. This is called holism. And then you don't only include the biological, the psychological, and the social part, but also the spiritual part, or even the ecological part of people being in nature, in their environment. And we need all of this together. This is the second pillar. The third pillar says we should not only diminish symptoms, take away the symptoms of the disease, but we also should focus on increasing health and well-being and resilience to problems. We need both. Sometimes you need to take away the symptoms, for instance, depressive symptoms, and the other part you need to increase your resilience to difficulty, to stress, your resilience to lack of sleep. You need to increase your lifestyle, take away trauma, increase your self-esteem. These are all things to increase your well-being and health. And then the fourth one, which is the most controversial one, says we need to take advantage and use in a wise way all the different healing modalities that have been around the world since ages. Why should only white male guys of middle age should be able to practice medicine? Everyone can practice medicine, can find things which can heal us. All the cultures around the world have this capacity. We just need to have skillful means and a way how to separate the cat from the wheat, that we can know what is beneficial for a patient and what is not. So we need experience, we need scientific evidence, and we need to use the right things in the right time, which is skillful means. And then you bring all together. And the interesting thing is, this also was something that Lama Gangchen Rinpoche advocated in his life. So when I came to this first medical conference in Italy, I was very intrigued to find that he was aware of integrative medicine and he was supporting this. And he, in his words, he said, we need a new wisdom key to find solutions to all the different problems in our world, especially on the healing part, when we combine Western medicine, traditional medicines, and spiritual medicine. He called it spiritual medicine, not only spirituality, but he was saying it's also a medicine because it can be so important in recovering our health and well-being.
Can you give us an example of that, Rogier, where you applied, or maybe someone in your hospital applied spiritual medicine? What would that look like?
I think it's a very intriguing question. I think many people would even from the start have a difficulty with the word because it can lead to like an idea that we are claiming that just to practice spirituality would take away serious diseases like this. I don't know about that, but I know that spirituality is very important. Let me give you one example from my own profession. I see many people with very negative self-esteem, like a low self-esteem, negative thoughts about themselves, criticizing themselves. And so whenever something difficult to them happens, for instance, they experience a loss or a breakup of a relationship or whatever negative happens, there's a painful situation or even a pain to the body, then this is the first trouble. Then the moment this happens, people try to deal with it, but often their response to it makes it worse. They try to avoid it, or they try to fight it or to resist it. And the moment that they get aware that they are doing this, they start to self-criticize their own response to the original problem. We call this triple trouble. The first trouble is a negative event, the pain either in body or in the mind. The second trouble is our response to it, which made it worse. And then the third trouble is criticizing yourself of not responding in the right way to the original pain. And you will not get out of this by analyzing or thinking or more self-criticism. It will not take you out of this trouble of triple trouble. The way out of this is compassionate awareness. So when we have compassion for ourselves and others, this opens. And this is the antidote to this negative mind of triple trouble. And this will help us. So we often we call it third generation cognitive behavioral therapy, and it includes mindfulness, it includes compassion, and it includes spirituality, for instance, in acceptance and commitment therapy. And to make it very simple, mindfulness is about being aware of what happens. Compassion is about being mild, being compassionate to ourselves and others. And spirituality and acceptance and commitment therapy help us to add to that, to know what's most important to us and how to achieve that. And all of these three can help us to deal with mental problems in a different way that medication helps us or psychotherapy helps us. And this is a way, I think, to combine Western psychiatry with spirituality.
Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of like an analytical meditation, this 3-step process, where you're analyzing your mind, analyzing and becoming obviously aware of the thought pattern, and then analyzing it, and then applying this 3-point strategy. Is that right?
Yeah, it starts with analyzing, but when you get a compassion training, when we do a training like this with people, we also experience and train the experience of inducing compassion within yourself. For instance, by remembering your most dear ones in your life, your feeling about your most dear person in your life, and then focusing on this feeling, let it grow and extend it to other people. This is like exercise from compassion therapy. And we are not used to train the mind. We are very used to train the body. So everybody goes to the gym. We're all working in training our muscles, but we also need to train the muscles of our mind, because when we constantly induce compassion within ourselves, this muscle of compassion gets stronger, and it helps us to deal more easily with this triple trouble whenever it hits our life, so we don't have to become depressed again.
Yeah, and helps us to deal with other people too, right?
Yeah.
Helps us to deal with other people as well, right?
And another way of saying it is spirituality can help us, meditation as a technique of spirituality can help us to have the right approach to whatever happens in our emotional life. So I always explain that psychotherapy and different kind of techniques help us in a horizontal way to deal with emotional problems. For instance, when I talk to my therapist or I talk to my partner in my life, I express my emotions, and in this horizontal way with other people, interacting with them, I heal myself. But some people are so deep in their emotions, or either so much away from their emotions, that this horizontal way is not yet possible, and they need to work on the vertical level. The vertical level means you have sometimes to zoom into your problems or zoom out of your problems. So people who have a very, very emotional, strong emotion life, and they go up and down all the time, they need to learn to defocus a little bit, to decenter, and to go from an observer position looking at their emotional life, and then they are more able to deal with it. So they need to go up in the elevator of the vertical position.
More of a macro view. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
And then they get more balance. But people, for instance, like myself, I was always a little bit too high in the elevator, approaching life from a more cognitive and analyzing way. I needed to learn by meditation to go deeper inside and to feel my body and feel my emotions, and then be able to deal with them in a horizontal way. So meditation techniques and spirituality can help us to move up and down on a vertical level, while Western psychology helps us to go on a horizontal level. And these two, they can complement each other. Because when you take a horizontal circle and you add to it the vertical movement, and you
there you
get
go.
the string of a DNA. It's a helix.
Wow.
And this is the origin of life.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've never heard that before. I love that. Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. This what is this called in medicine? You see this in medicine
it's a
all the
helix,
time.
the helix, and our DNA is made up like this in the core of our cells. So it's the essence of life. Has these two movements inside, and when we combine the medicines and approaches of West and East, we can have this best way of approaching things.
Very interesting. Actually, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's many of these kind of images that have this really profound meaning, right? Yes. You see that like in these different mandalas, and these different, it looks like you're saying, this helix, but it has this very deep meaning. Yeah. So it's really interesting that you've how do you say, analyzed that and came up with this formula that is really holistic. I love this.
Yeah, it helps me to have a metaphor or how these things can complement each other. Yeah. And I agree, Tibetan Buddhism is very rich in symbols, in colors, and it's something that's very important for to explain sometimes, because patients who come to our center, who come, for instance, for a mindfulness meditation, they sometimes have some experience with, for instance, Zen Buddhism, and they think when they go to a meditation place, they will go into a very silent room where there's no images and everything is white, and there's only one pillar with one candle, for instance, which is a useful technique and helps many people. Yeah. But if you have this expectation, and you go to a Tibetan Buddhist temple, you get a little bit overstressed and overstimulated. So, and that's the interesting thing, because we as humans, we are so diverse. We have different minds, different habits, different ways of dealing with things. And this is why also we have different healing techniques and different meditation techniques. Yeah, so for one person, Zen Buddhism is the right thing to go. For other people, it's Tibetan Buddhism. And somebody else, it can be Christianity or whatever tradition can help us. Yeah. We need a wide array of different techniques to be able to heal everyone.
Making peace with the environment.
Making peace with the environment.
Making peace with Amazonia.
Making peace with Amazonia.
Making peace 5 elements.
Making peace with the 5 elements.
Making peace with the earth element.
Making peace with the earth element.
Making peace with the wind element.
Making peace with the wind element.
Making peace with the water element.
Making peace with the water element.
Making peace with the fire element.
Making peace with the fire element.
Making peace with the space element.
Making peace with the space element.
Mentally healthy.
Mentally healthy.
Physically healthy.
Physically healthy.
Inner peace.
Inner peace.
World peace.
World peace.
Now and forever.
Now and forever.
Definitely, because there's so many millions of people, right, with different personalities and backgrounds and karma. It was interesting. Carmen Iodici was on our show recently, and she was saying that she studied with Lama for, lived and worked with him and traveled with him for practically the whole time that he was in the West. And she said that one of the reasons why Tibetan Buddhism has so many images and so many symbols and so many mandalas and so many Buddhas and dakinis, dakas, is so it helps the mind to focus on all these positive images. Like you said, majority of our mind is filled with 80% of our mind is filled with negativity. It's filled with thoughts that we continually repeat that are 80% negative. So, so Rinpoche was saying, Lama Gangchen was saying that when we are exposed to all these images, that we're filling our mind with something that's positive, something that's calling us to a higher way of being. So we need to fill our minds, given our minds habitually is filled with so much negativity. We need to fill our minds with all this positivity. So,
Exactly.
for example, in his room, or even in the Gompa, there was so many images and so many, people that he was praying for, malas, you experienced that being in his room in Albignano, for example. And so Carmen asked him one day, why is there so much? Why don't you have more space? And he said, no, because when people come to visit me or come to ask me questions, that they'll be here and their minds will be full of all these positive images and positive energy to help to shift the mind from all the negative. I never heard that before. Isn't that great?
Yes, I agree completely. And because sometimes people say, I want to empty my mind. I want to stop my thoughts. But this is not possible because the mind will always continue.
Yeah.
And for instance, in mindfulness meditation, we learn for the first time to look at our thoughts, to not to be our thoughts, but to recognize that thoughts are coming through us and passing through us.
Yeah.
But still, even if we do, we will see that all the clouds of thoughts which are passing through us, many of them are negative. So when you are aware of that, then still you have this problem, even though you have this diffusion, not being completely together with your thoughts, even when you start observing them, which
I
is a
am
good
not my
step.
thoughts. Yeah, you become
Still have
more
the thoughts.
you become
So-
the observer. Yeah, instead of
So
being.
what you like to do is to replace them and to use this aspect of the mind, which will always continue having thoughts, emotions, feeling, images. You like to keep this process going, not trying to resist it, but the content to be different. And this is what Lama was doing with giving us mantras, giving us songs, giving us images. He was filling our thoughts, replacing them with more positive one, which would then be repeating through our minds, but with a better result than the negative thoughts which most of us have.
Yeah. And also the mantras help that whole vibration in the body, not just in the thoughts, but really
Exactly. Also,
translating into and I also think it translates into the environment also. The trees, the wind, all the elements. This is,
yes.
in the more subtle level that maybe we don't see, but I've certainly had experience of that. And I'm sure you have too. Rinpoche talked about how our thoughts affect the environment and that this increase in violence in our thoughts and consumerism, materialism, less feminine energy, more this kind of domineering materialism is causing the climate crisis. So this interdependence as well with the climate. Yeah. So Rogier, could you tell me, give us an example? Because I'm sure all of our listeners, all of us, we've all experienced depression at one time or another in our life, or we've experienced anxiety. I know many people experience anxiety at higher levels today than ever, from what I read and, witness. Can you just you give us an example of how the healing methods that you learn from Lama, and from Buddhism and all your training, as a Western doctor and scientist, how that could help, for example, if I was having anxiety in my life, how could that help me?
Yes, this is a very important question. I agree. Depression, anxiety, and addiction is growing still in increasing in our world. It was already before COVID, but it increased even more after that. Probably due also to the measurements or the actions that were taken to have like social distancing and these kind of things, which probably also increased this difficulty. But also our food system, also social media use, also drug use. There are many, many reasons for that. Still, it's there. And so in psychiatry, we have two main approaches, which is medication and psychotherapy. And both of them can help people. So like about 60% of people with depression are helped with medication and cognitive behavioral therapy or other types of psychotherapy, system approach or EMDR. And these things we also do, and it's helpful until a certain extent. Then besides that, what we did is we integrated a lot of lifestyle changing interventions. So we help people to change their diet, because we know that when you eat a lot of industrialized food, like junk food, you have a high risk of depression. And when you have a more Mediterranean food with fresh vegetables and olive oil and these kind of things, then there's less risk of depression. So this is a very easy way, even tasteful way, to improve your mind. Then running is, or even any kind of exercise, is very interesting, because many people don't know that running therapy and also a lot of sports are as effective as antidepressants.
This was so interesting when you first told me this.
Yeah.
And I actually repeated this to a couple friends of mine, that you had said that the exercise was as effective as antidepressants. And one of my friends says, yeah, but it's so much easier to just pop a pill.
Yes. And this is exactly why it is like this. And then from the patient perspective, we like to take the easy approach of taking a pill. From the doctor's perspective, we are trained to prescribe medicines. So this is almost like a reflex. And the pharmaceutical industry has an important benefit from a financial perspective. So all three of us are in the same vicious cycle of prescribing. But there are other ways that take more effort. It's more difficult, but they have better results, because the same amount of reduction of depression, but the side effects of running are positive, whereas the side effects of medications are negative. So, for instance, if I take antidepressants, I will probably gain weight, I will get sedated, the quality of my sleep decreases, and it can be bad for your sex life. Whereas when you start exercising in any way you like, or even fitness or sports, then you will lose weight, you will improve the quality of your life, of your sleep, you will have a better sex life. It's evidence-based for better sex, which is important to know.
Yeah.
And then
your heart, your liver, circulation, everything improved, right?
So nutrition is there, exercise is there. Then there's stress and stress reduction. And so many people feel overstressed in our time. And there are many reasons for that, many levels of reasons. But just to give you one, the amount of information that we receive in our life increases every year about 5%. And now a human in a Western world at this time receives about 47 gigabytes of information, which is about 12 movies every day of information. Every day. And this is the same amount as a very educated person in 1600s would experience in a whole lifetime.
Wow.
We get the same in one day as 500 years ago in a whole lifetime. Wow. So we are actually in a large evolutionary experiment, because we have changed so many things in our life, in everything, in traveling, in exercising, in eating, in screens, in you name it. But we don't know which are the effects, because we didn't randomize clinical trials or good research before to know what would be the effects of this. This is just an experiment. And the same is screen time. Like in America and Holland, we use about 6 hours a day. We are looking at screens. And in Holland, we are almost world champion sitting still. We are sitting almost 10 hours a day on a chair in Holland on average. So all of these things, they are so bad for our health. And the solution is quite easy, but it can be difficult to apply it for a longer time. So we have difficulty to change our habits. But there's a big opportunity with diet, exercise, stress reduction. Then there's sleep. We have seen a worldwide decrease of sleep of about 20% in the last 100 years. So we are saying, as a human species that the day is more important than the night. So we try to increase daytime by using lights at night and keep on working at night, working at night shifts. So the amount of day activities is increasing, and the amount of night activities, like being together, sharing stories, sitting at the campfire, this is making smaller. And this is another thing that adds to our problem, because if we get on average less than 6 hours of sleep a night, then we get an increase of our stress system, which makes it more sensitive to any kind of influence. And then you get into a vicious cycle. So all of these things, this is the second level. So I first explained for depression and anxiety the conventional approach with medicine and psychotherapy. The second part is lifestyle changes. I mentioned a few now. There are more, but just to give you an example. The third approach is using natural medicines. And many people, many colleagues in my profession, they make fun of us. And they say, Rogier, just eating a little bit of lettuce won't take away your depression, or tomato has never been able to take away pain, or these kind of jokes. Or herbs, we threw the herbs to the pasta and the lasagna. We don't use the herbs for medicines. These kind of jokes they make. And in a way, it's funny. In a way, it's also ignorant, because they forget that the natural world is the origin of our medicines.
Yeah.
Even up to today,
thousands and thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
This way. Yeah.
Even up to today, 60% of all the medicines which we have in hospitals and everywhere are directly derived from nature. So it's stupid to make fun of it. And so we have collected about 12 herbs and supplements and vitamins, which can help with mental disorders to diminish symptoms and to increase health. So we use it also. And then the fourth step is to make use of complementary medicines, also called traditional medicines. And this is the most tricky part, because in our country and many other countries, there is a very fierce debate between opponents and proponents of traditional medicine. So people who are either in favor or against. And this is a very fierce debate, and usually it's very emotional also. And this has to do because if we are accepting, for instance, energy medicine, then we are accepting the paradigm of energy medicine, which says that there is a flow of energy going through chakras and meridians and life, and it's just influencing our health. But if you have a paradigm in which this is not possible, then you get a strong reaction against people who say it's working, because it challenges your worldview. And this gives the strong debates. So this is why it's difficult to combine all of these medicines. At the same time, we also need to be careful, because not everything that is complementary or traditional is always effective. And even it can be harmful. So we need to have skillful means and scientific research to find the right approach and to protect people from medicines which are not effective or even harmful. Yeah. And this is difficult.
Yeah, but that's also the case of allopathic medicines. Many of them are harmful too. So, but I love what you were writing about, and what you have said of how you practice, is that you're looking at the individuals that you're treating in a holistic way, and really looking at the whole being, and with all these modalities, taking into consideration all these modalities, right?
Yes.
Whereas, unfortunately, here in the U.S., the way our healthcare system is set up, many doctors don't have time to take a holistic approach. They get paid only for 15 minutes with the patient or, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, So they're not looking, they don't have the time, because they're not being paid to do that. And so how can you talk about that? How do you, as a practitioner, because maybe there's some physicians that are listening to our show, how do you take a holistic approach when, financially it's a challenge, or the whole system is not based on that?
No, I acknowledge this is difficult. So I think the system is sick, not only the patients. And that makes it difficult to function. I've been working for 26 years in mental health care, and it has been draining my energy. And I've also had difficulty to keep my balance, being able to work in a system like this with no time, with working at night, working with aggression. There are many difficulties, but still, I'm an optimist, and I think it is true. It is possible to make small changes. And so my wife, Elke, and myself, we are 3 times a year, we go with 20 doctors into the mountains, very close to Albiana Healing Meditation. We also visit there one day. And we talk with them about how to make these changes. And one of the things we found is that many doctors are so overstressed that they run around and they don't listen anymore to the patient within 17 seconds after starting the consultation. Then they already started talking themselves. This is on average. And what we learned is we practice with them, try to start every consultation with 1 minute of genuine, full presence and awareness. Listening with complete being there. Bring the mind home in the body and really be there, fully attentive. Only 1 minute. Then you can do your thing. And what they found is that they have now so much more easy to do their work in 10 minutes than before, because it was inefficient to start talking too early, because people had the feeling that they couldn't do their say, and then you're losing time and having difficulty with a relationship. So it's not only the quantity of time, it's also the quality of the time. Yeah. And we as professionals can increase that by practicing meditation awareness during the consultation, and that will make it more easy than otherwise to work within the sick system.
Yeah, I love that. Because it's really like heal the healers. Who takes care of the healers? You see so many physicians and nurses and healthcare people, they're not even taking care of themselves. So how can you take care of really others in a holistic way if you're not taking care of yourself?
This is true, Lila. But I have to acknowledge, I myself, I also experienced this. 3 times in my life, I went through to almost or borderline burnout because of trying to function in this system. Is not easy. Yeah. And in my profession, you hear so much traumas and so much suffering people go through. Yeah. And it's really difficult not to go down as well, to have your mind go down. Yeah. When we talk to somebody, our limbic system, like the emotional part of our brain, tends to resonate. And that means that when you have a good relationship, you have trust and you have attention to each other, then about 10% of the feeling of one person is being transmitted to the other person. So we call it limbic resonance. And so you feel a little bit of what the other person is feeling. But if you are dealing with a lot of people who have always so much heavy mind all day long, and all day long you're talking to all of these people, it can be difficult. So I don't criticize my colleagues or people in healthcare, because I see them working with their dedication and with their heart. But it's very difficult to function in a system like this if you don't have a trained mind. And this is why we don't only need spirituality for our patients, we also need spirituality and meditation for the healthcare professionals. Totally. And for the managers and the directors to make the right decisions. We need it everywhere.
Because it takes we use this word bodhisattva so often on our show, but someone who's has the commitment to reach enlightenment for the benefit of others. But even if you're not at that, say, level, the doctors and nurses and healthcare people, they're bodhisattvas, because you're all day long helping others to overcome some kind of sickness, mental or physical sickness. And like you said, to hear that kind of trauma or sickness or pain, suffering all day long, it takes a certain kind of person to be able to do that. Someone who has a big heart.
Yes, but not only the person, it's also something you can train. Because this is another reason why we need meditation.
Yeah.
Because I learned from meditation experience how to keep a part of my awareness in my own body when I'm listening to the other person. And this is something you can learn by training. And that is lacking now in our clinical training of doctors. But we should teach them this because it helps a lot. If you put all your attention in the other person and you lose connection to your own body and your own being, then you drain your energy and you get full of the problem of the other person. Right. But if you keep some part, even though you are attentive to the other person, you keep some part of your attention inside, then it doesn't happen so much. And it's more easy to deal with everything.
Well, that sounds to me like the combination of wisdom and compassion. Compassion, if you just have compassion, then like you said, you can completely lose yourself or burn out. But you have to have the wisdom, to know that, okay, I keep in myself grounded, or I keep in my own, body and mind, but then also understanding the law of karma, that this is this person's, karma playing out, but that wisdom and compassion is so important. Oftentimes we do talk about compassion in this context, but the wisdom part is just as important, right? Don't you think?
Fully. We use this motto in meditation that may I have the courage to change what can be changed, and may I have the patience to accept what cannot be changed, and may I have the wisdom to make the difference.
To know the difference,
And this is so important because I have noticed in myself that when people go through a lot of suffering, part of me does not accept the situation. I feel this inner, I'm fighting the situation. I'm not accepting. And it can also be in myself. It can be in my patient. And then you lose a lot of energy. So it's exactly as you say. You need the two wings to fly to enlightenment of both compassion and wisdom. And you need the wisdom to know when there is a situation where you cannot change the situation anymore, but you can be useful by being with the person and comforting the person and letting them know you are there, and not losing your energy in saying this should not be like this, because then we are fighting reality, which doesn't work in the first place, but even will make it worse because you're losing your energy and frustration and anger is there.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. So that's a biggie. I see that happening all the time. Actually, this weekend, we had multiple situations with some friends who didn't accept circumstances that were arising, and it ruined their whole weekend. Can you give us like one quick strategy of how do you actually accept a situation that you don't like or a person that you don't like?
This is a big one, a difficult one, because I think we all know the theory. It's not so difficult to understand this feeling. It's so difficult to practice it. But it helps first by acknowledging that there is a limit to what we can do. So let me give you one example about this, which I learned in my training. When I was a young doctor, I was very, very, very concerned about people taking their lives, about suicide. And I was so stressed about this might happen that I felt like freezing and blocking when this issue would arise, when people would talk about this. And I felt this very heavy responsibility that I needed to prevent this from happening. And I had a lot of difficulty. I lost so much energy by being afraid of this and trying to do things, and even, like fighting the situation of suicidality in my patient. And then one of my mentors said to me, listen, the only thing that is your responsibility is to be there, to connect, and to add in a most constructive way as possible to the situation. So your responsibility is not to have the outcome, because the outcome is without your influence.
Yes, not your
control. Your responsibility is what you do and how you respond to it. And that's kind of simple in a way, but it helped me a lot to make this distinction. Is this something that I can change? Am I the only one who can change the situation, or am I just one piece of the puzzle? And let me just try to be as positive as I can and accept whatever outcome there may be. And maybe it is my patient who I was treating who still committed suicide, and maybe I still did the best thing I could. It just, these things can happen. And that helped me a lot to deal with this issue. And in a smaller version, we can practice all ourselves to see, okay, I didn't want this to happen. I don't like it to happen. It might ruin my weekend. But is it something I can change now? Just to think about this motto: can I change it, or do I need to accept it? And if we look at this the situation from this angle, from this glass, it will help us to diminish leaking energy and fighting things which cannot be changed in the first place.
It cannot be changed. Yeah, I love that Tibetan saying. It goes something like, if you can change it, then change it. If you can't change it, why suffer? You can't change it. I mean, it's just simple, but but it's like that. If we actually can, get our heads around that, right?
Yeah, and that brings me to I have worked with many people in healthcare. I have had so many teachers, mentors, supervisors, people who looked at me, who advised me. And from all of them, Lama Gangchen, as a Lama healer, had capacities, from my perspective, more than all of them together. Because he was able, in so many different and difficult situations, to be genuinely present and act. Actually, he was able to do this, what we just mentioned. He would always know when he could change something, and he was fully capable and accepting any situation which he could not change, even difficult ones. And I remember very many ones. So that was something that helped me to go to this path of meditation and spirituality, which was a little bit out of my comfort zone. But I saw him actually practicing what he preached. Always, with any person, in any circumstance. And I've been with him for 16 years, quite intensely, traveled everywhere around the world to all different situations, and never, ever saw one moment that he lost his control of his mind, or any negative emotions, or any complaining, or any judgment of people. Never. And this was something that I never have seen, ever, in any other place. Well, a few lamas, which was not so familiar with them, I've also seen it, but I didn't see it in any common people around me or any teachers I had in my life. I had a little bit difficulty with teach because I have an authority issue in my life. I was a rebel from the first start, but the only one which I didn't have, who was in a position of superiority to me, which I didn't have this problem, was Lama Gangchen, because he had such a pure way of guiding. There was no personal agenda ever. It was always adding to the situation in the most positive way. So this is, and still it was uncomfortable for me, and still until today, as we're talking now, the scientific, logical part of my mind has some objections to what I'm saying because I feel there's two parts inside, and I already hear people criticize me for what I'm saying. But these are things I experienced. And now I like to continue my career and my spiritual path, both of them, to bringing them more together. This is why I also now was appointed professor of spirituality at the university, to try to bring the scientific research part and this experiential part, which I experienced for many years, and bring them together to find new wisdom keys, as Lama Gangchen would say, for the problems we have in our world.
Well, even having that title at a university now is showing that this is a new age. We're in a new age now that people at universities are open to talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The very fact that they accepted this and they appointed me with this is really important. It says something about the spirit of the age, which is changing. And I'm very happy with that because we need it.
We need it. need it so much. Yeah. So I see this being integrated at the United Nations. Lama brought this whole conversation of spirituality to the United Nations, which was before that just strictly political, and then of course they have the whole humanitarian work, but now spirituality is very much a part of the conversation of what's happening in our world. And also, as you said, medicine and in academia. And I was watching, I think it was on YouTube. It was a conference with the head of spirituality and integrated medicine, I think is his title, at Stanford University. Huh. And he was interviewing Amachi. Amachi is the Indian saint. She's a very well-known, incredibly high master, female master who lives in India. I met her many times. And they were interviewing her, and she was just talking about her formula for what is a happy life, a happy, peaceful, successful life. And she was saying all the things you were saying: compassion, wisdom, social support, getting exercise, eating well. And it was so interesting because here she's talking, of her incredibly wisdom way. And after she stopped talking, the professor says, "Whoa, that took us 30 years of research to get that. You've known that all along."
Exactly.
So interesting, right?
I'm going now to medical conferences, and we are joking as researchers between the two of us. We say, how far did we get that we spend millions of dollars on randomized clinical trials, working for years our butts off to prove that being healthy is healthy?
Yeah,
it's insane in a way.
Yeah. All our ancestors knew about this, and all the wisdom traditions knew about it, but we had to prove it. We had to prove it.
And we have to find it again. And then it brings me to last month, 2 months ago almost. I went to this conference in America together with Lama Michel Rinpoche. Mm-hmm. And it was about integrative medicine. And I was in the program committee of the organizing committee of this American conference in Cleveland. And we were looking as a committee for speakers who could really bring a different message. And so I convinced them to accept Lama Michel as a speaker. And they were a little bit concerned because he is, of course, very different in a way. And we have this experience with him, but they don't. So we finally decided for him to have a dialogue together with an established medical doctor from the Western world, Prochalski. She has been working with spirituality in medical care for over 25 years. She wrote books and papers about it. And so we had them sit together at this conference. And you have to imagine, this is a very big venue, like 800 people from 70 countries, all of them in a big medical conference. And they're very small on the center of the stage, 2 chairs, and these 2 people, these amazing people talking to each other on the need of spirituality. And for me,
spirituality in medicine.
Yeah, and it was such a special event. The whole day there was sound and noise and people walking around. When they were talking, it was complete silence. You could hear a pinfall on the ground, on the floor. Everybody was silent. Everybody was sitting still, and they were like almost mesmerized by the exchange of East and West, old and young, science and experience. It was beautiful from 2 sides speaking about the need, not only the importance, but the need for spirituality in medicine and in healthcare. And they agreed completely. She is a medical doctor doing science. He is a Tibetan Lama who was born in Brazil and trained in India and Tibet. But they understood each other completely. There was no difficulty whatsoever. Wow. And then Lama Michel, before he started talking, he started acknowledging his teachers. He always does this when he gives a talk. Before he says something, he says, I'm doing my prayer, my mantra, guru prayer of my teacher, because if there's anything I could say today, it will be because somebody has taught it to me. This is what Lama Michel literally always says. And for me, this is such an example because I notice what it does to me when I go on a stage. Your ego grows. this is what happens. It's somehow we get attached to this image. Look at me, I'm the big professor, and I'm
I'm
the
going to
big
give you all this
psychiatrist,
information,
and I'm
right? I'm the
so
expert.
fancy. I know these things. Listen to me. And then there's somebody coming there, with so much presence and humility, saying, "Listen, if there's anything I can say, I've been learned this. Somebody taught it to me," and this helps us to be humble and also to be grateful, being grateful for what we have received and what we have learned. And there's such a tendency in our world to want things as a quick fix. And we think that because we want it, we have a right to get it. And this brings us to so many problems, also fighting situations and not accepting situations. But when we are grateful, then immediately there's no fighting. There's immediately already the acceptance of the situation, whatever is there. And that for me is such an important lesson and such a beautiful aspect. Again, another aspect of spirituality, which helps us to have a sane mind.
I love that. I listened to that talk. I know you sent me the audio tape of that talk. And I was so moved by him saying that I'm going to say these prayers, and the meaning of these prayers is to give thanks to all my teachers.
Yes.
Because whatever I'm going to say to you today is because I've been taught them. It's so moving. I've shared that with so many people.
Yes.
And immediately whoever I share it with, the response is always an exhale. Wow. Yeah. Everything I know also was because someone taught me. It puts you in this place of gratitude, which I think it just helps you to relax when you're in a space of gratitude, don't you think?
I agree. You know, we have in psychology this wave of positive psychology, which is now acknowledging these things, that it's good to practice being grateful, being compassionate, being patient. These are all things which are like the paramitas in Tibetan Buddhism, but they are now also acknowledged by science and psychology that is actually good for our mind. And it makes sense because there's an old saying that the grandson comes to grandfather and he says, "Grandfather, are we as people, are we actually good people, but we are sometimes falling down a little bit, doing things which are not so nice to each other? Or are we basically devils who try to be better as we are, trying to cover up all the dirt we have inside? What are we?" And then grandfather says to grandson, "Listen, son, we are both, because we have the seeds of anger, of the seeds of envy, all of these things we have inside, and we sometimes also manifest it. But at the same time, we also have the seeds of being compassionate and loving and caring and patient. We also can be. So both of them are in us, like potentials. And one time the other one comes up, and then the other comes up. But then the grandson
angel
says,
and
"Yeah,
the devil."
exactly." And then the grandson says, "Well, that's all very nice, but who's going to win?" And then grandfather says, "Well, listen, you have to see them as two wolves. One is the one aspect, the other is the other aspect, and they are fighting. But the one who wins is the one you feed the most, because he is the strongest." And feeding the right wolf, feeding the right aspect of your mind is by repeating and focusing your mind. So if we focus on all the things in our life which we can be grateful for, and there are so many things, even in the life of people who have very much difficulties, so many things to be grateful, then grateful as an aspect of positivity is growing in our mind. So everything we get attention for a long time and which we repeat, it makes it bigger in our mind. So this is why we have to learn to detach from all these negative thoughts we talked about before, and to actively turn them towards positivity by focusing our minds on all the things which are there, we are genuinely there, to be grateful about. And then if we repeat this, then it makes it stronger, and this wolf will win.
The wolf will win. And we keep feeding the angel instead of the devil.
Feed the angel, not the devil.
So I always ask our guests to close with a dedication. Rogier, either you could say a prayer or a mantra, or if you'd just like to say, some words, that this conversation be of benefit to the people who are listening. So I like to do some kind of dedication.
I like very much to close with one phrase Alain Michel always uses, and I often quote him in places where I go, and that is have high aspiration, but low expectation and constant effort, because effort without perseverance is a waste of energy.
Brilliant. Brilliant. We'll put that in the show notes. So we have that tip, that dedication we'll leave so all of our listeners can copy and paste that. Keep that one on a sticky note down on our refrigerator, right? To always remember that one. I love it. I love it. Can you just say the three one real quick again?
Have high aspiration, low expectation, and constant effort, because effort without perseverance is a waste of energy.
Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Rogier. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your journey with your life with Lama Gangchen and all the incredible, wise and practical ways that you've integrated Lama Gangchen's teachings into your daily life, to help all these people, all the patients and all the conferences, and you're probably impacting millions of people with this way of integrating, this ancient wisdom in a modern way. Really beautiful.
I'm not sure about that, but if only 3 people, then I would be happy.
Yeah. One person by one person by one person by the next. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. It was a really beautiful conversation.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for this effort of doing this. I think it's very important for all of us. So thank you so much.
Lama Gangchen